You enter the tunnel and the daylight dies behind you. 887 meters of solid granite, bored through the spine of the Carpathian Mountains at 2,042 meters above sea level. No lights, just your headlights and the cold and the sound of the engine bouncing off walls close enough to touch. The air inside is maybe 6 degrees. It smells like stone and old water. You drive for about 45 seconds in total darkness, and then the other end opens, and you are above the clouds, above the tree line, above almost everything in Romania, and the valley of Transylvania falls away below you in a way that makes you stop the car. This is the Transfăgărășan, 151 kilometers of paved road through the highest range in Romania, 80 hairpin turns, 830 bridges, 27 viaducts, a road that climbs past waterfalls, falling directly onto the asphalt, past glacial lakes, the color of cold sky, past cliff faces that drop hundreds of meters with nothing between your door and the air. In 2009, a television crew drove 3 supercars along it and declared it, in front of 6.7 million viewers, the best road in the world. They were probably right. They did not say what is under it. Somewhere on the southern ascent, beneath the asphalt that millions of tourists have driven over, there is a bulldozer, crushed flat by a falling boulder during construction. The rock that killed it was too heavy to move, the schedule too tight to wait, so the workers filled the hole and paved over it and kept going. The machine is still there. No marker, no record in any tourist guide. You drive over it without knowing. The official death toll for the Transfăgărășan is 40. The men who were there say the number was hundreds. The records that would settle it were kept by a government that had every reason to keep them low, and that government was executed in a courtyard on Christmas Day 1989 and cannot be asked. What is not disputed? The road was built by men who were not asked whether they wanted to build it. Ordered by a man who decided in a single paranoid week in 1968 that Romania needed a road through the most forbidding mountains in the country, and needed it finished before the Soviets came. The Soviets never came. The road is still there. The bulldozer is still under it. This is the story of why it was built, who built it, and what it cost them. But first, a night in August 1968, a man standing on a balcony in Bucharest, and a speech that made the most dangerous road in Europe feel necessary. The tanks entered Czechoslovakia at night. By the time the sun rose on August 21st, Soviet armor was rolling through Prague, and the Prague Spring, 6 months of cautious political liberalization under Alexander Dubček, was over. The Warsaw Pact had decided that a socialist country experimenting with reform was a threat that could not be tolerated. 4 Warsaw Pact nations sent troops: the Soviet Union, Bulgaria, Hungary, Poland. Romania was a Warsaw Pact member. Romania sent no one. That same day, within hours of the invasion, Nicolae Ceaușescu stood on the balcony of the Romanian Communist Party's Central Committee building in Bucharest's Palace Square and addressed an estimated 100,000 people below him. He called the invasion a grave error, a serious danger to peace in Europe, a violation of national sovereignty. He declared that Romania had refused to participate, and that if anyone attempted to do to Romania what had just been done to Czechoslovakia, the Romanian people would fight. The crowd went wild. This was, for a moment, the most popular speech any Romanian leader had given in a generation. What the crowd could not see, and what Ceaușescu could not say, was the fear underneath it. He had just denounced the Soviet Union in public. He had done it because defying Moscow played well domestically, because it positioned Romania as independent within the Eastern Bloc, because it had earned him goodwill from the West. But he had also done it knowing, with clarity, what it meant. The same logic that had sent tanks into Prague could send tanks into Bucharest. He had watched the Soviets crush Hungary in 1956. He had watched them crush Czechoslovakia this morning. The Brezhnev Doctrine, the Soviet position that socialist countries could not be permitted to deviate from the bloc, was not a theory. It was armor on cobblestones. In the weeks after the speech, Ceaușescu ran through scenarios. Soviet invasion. What would it look like? Where would it come from? The USSR's border curved around Romania's northeast. An invasion force pushing south would need to cross or flank the Carpathian Mountains. The Carpathians split Romania roughly in half. The heavily populated south, including Bucharest below them, the historical region of Transylvania to the north. Mountain passes existed, but they were narrow. They ran through river valleys, and they were exactly the kind of terrain an invading force could block in hours, sealing southern Romania off from any reinforcement from the north. Ceaușescu wanted a route that could not be blocked, a direct crossing, through the mountains themselves, through the Făgăraș range, the highest peaks in Romania, where Moldoveanu and Negoiu rose above 2,500 meters, and no road of any kind had ever been built. The idea was, by any conventional measure, absurd. The Făgăraș Mountains are not a place where roads go. They are a place where roads end. The rock is granite. The weather above 1,500 meters changes in minutes, without warning, in ways that make any outdoor work dangerous and sustained construction nearly impossible. In winter, the high passes accumulate meters of snow. In summer, storms roll in from nowhere, and temperatures drop 20 degrees in an hour. The slopes are unstable. Rockfalls are constant. A road through them would require blasting through solid granite for most of its length. It would require bridges over gorges, tunnels through ridgelines, retaining walls along faces where no foothold existed. It would require moving approximately 3 million tons of rock. Ceaușescu ordered it built in 4 years. Not because 4 years was a reasonable timeline for a road of this complexity through terrain of this difficulty. Because 4 years was when he needed it. Because the threat he feared was not abstract and not patient. Because he had watched, 8 weeks ago, what happened to countries that were not prepared. Retired Romanian Army Colonel Ion Bratu, who commanded a crew of 175 soldiers on the construction, confirmed decades later that the invasion of Czechoslovakia was the direct trigger. Not a consideration, not one factor among many. The trigger, a road that had never been discussed. Through mountains no engineer had surveyed for this purpose. Ordered because a man on a balcony had made a speech he could not take back, and had to mean it. The order went out in 1970. The Făgăraș Mountains received it without comment. Făgăraș, spring 1970. The smell reaches them before the mountain does. Pine resin and cold mud and something sharper underneath. The particular bite of high-altitude air that has no name but that the lungs recognize immediately as different from the air below. The soldiers arrive by truck, 18 and 19 years old, most of them having never been above 1,000 meters. They step out into a temperature that is colder than the calendar says it should be, and look up at what they have been sent to build through. It is a wall, not a slope, not a range in the gentle sense. A wall of granite rising from the valley floor to over 2,000 meters in less than 15 horizontal kilometers. The southern face of the Făgăraș catches the morning light and gives nothing back. The rock is gray and ancient and does not look like a thing that can be negotiated with. There is no road in, not a track, not a path. To reach the upper construction sites, everything has to go up on foot or by hand-cranked winch. Food, fuel, timber for the temporary shelters, coils of detonator cord, cases of dynamite. The men who are going to build the road have to carry it up the mountain before the road exists to carry it. This is the first of many logical problems on the Transfăgărășan, and it is the most basic one. The granite of the Făgăraș is not like the rock in the river valleys below. Down there, a charge of dynamite fractures stone in roughly predictable ways. Up here, The rock is compressed and faulted in patterns that no surface survey can reliably map. A blast that should clear 50 meters might clear 5, or might trigger a slide that buries everything the day before had cut. The men learn this the way they learn everything on the mountain, by watching what it does and adjusting, with no margin for the adjustment to be wrong. Above 1,800 meters, summer does not arrive in the way it arrives elsewhere. In July, the temperature at night can drop below freezing. In the afternoon, a thunderstorm can materialize from nothing in 20 minutes, bringing hail the size of coins, lightning that strikes the granite faces and sends shards flying, and fog so dense that the man 2 meters in front of you disappears. Work that requires precision, drilling, measuring, setting charges, becomes, in that fog, a matter of sound and touch more than sight. The workers do it anyway, because the schedule does not pause for weather. The wolves come into the camps at night. This is not a detail that anyone dramatized later. Colonel Ion Bratu, who commanded a crew of 175 soldiers on the upper slopes, mentioned the cold and the sudden weather as the primary hardships, then added wild animals as the second concern. In the same tone of voice he used to describe the rest of it. The bears came for the food stores. The wolves circled the shelters. On Sundays, if the weather allowed, the wives and girlfriends of the soldiers came up from the villages below to visit. They came up because the men were not allowed to come down during the week. The mountain was where they lived. Gheorghe Tudosoiu, the chief roadman during construction, arrived at the Capra Lake area in 1976, 2 years after the official opening, and did not come back down until 1980. 4 years at altitude, the road had been declared finished. The mountain had not agreed. The workforce was 2 teams, one pushing north from the village of Baskov near Pitești, one pushing south from Carcișoara in Transylvania. The plan was that they would meet somewhere in the high pass, at a point that had been named before the road reached it. Poarta Întâlnirii, the meeting gate. In the summer of 1970, both teams hit the granite at the same time. The mountain received them without ceremony and immediately began demonstrating what it thought of the 4-year deadline. To understand what it took to build the Transfăgărășan, you need to hold 2 things in your head at the same time. The first is the scale. This was not a construction project. It was a geological event conducted at the pace of human labor. Over its 4 years of main construction, the project displaced approximately 3 million tons of rock. It used 6,520 tons of dynamite, enough explosive force spread across 92 kilometers of mountain to rewrite the topography of the Carpathians, managed in individual blasts by workers who were learning as they went, using charges that fractured rock in ways that experienced engineers would have found difficult to predict and untrained soldiers found nearly impossible to control. The second thing is the granularity. The road was not built by numbers. It was built by individual men in individual moments, with no room for the moment to go wrong. But before the scale and before the granularity, there is the problem at the center of the entire project. The one that no one in Bucharest had fully thought through before ordering the road built. The one that determined whether the 2 teams, pushing from opposite ends of the same mountain range, through granite they could not see through, would meet at the right place or miss and leave a gap no one could close without starting over. 2 teams, 2 directions, 1 mountain. The north team started from Carcișoara in Transylvania and pushed south. The south team started from Baskov near Pitești and pushed north. Each team could only calculate where the other was. They could not see each other. They could not communicate in real time. The granite between them did not fracture in straight lines, and every blast that cleared 5 meters instead of 50 introduced a small error into the line. Small errors, accumulated over kilometers, become large ones. There was no GPS, no satellite positioning. Military surveying equipment and the mathematics of engineers working at the edge of what the deadline allowed. On August 16, 1971, the two teams broke through to each other on the southern slope, at 600 meters altitude. They had been cutting toward that point from opposite sides of the range for over a year. When they met, the soldiers named the place Poarta Intalniri, the meeting gate. A bronze plaque was fixed to a rock face on the edge of a precipice, and it is still there. In this area, on the 16th of August 1971, two engineering units working to open the Transfăgărășan from opposite directions met. In memory of this event, the brave engineers named this place the Meeting Gate. The road surface was continuous. The line had held. But the meeting on the surface was only half the problem. The tunnel was the other half. We get to it. But first, what it actually felt like to work on the faces. A soldier setting a charge in a granite cliff at 1,800 meters in a thunderstorm. The detonator cord wet. The rock behaving differently from yesterday's rock, 20 meters away, because the Făgăraș granite is faulted in ways the surface gives no indication of. The standard safe distance requires retreating down a slope that, if the blast triggers a slide above, he will need to come back up. Two soldiers operating a bulldozer on a freshly cut shelf 50 meters above a gorge. The shelf is exactly wide enough for the machine. The outer edge is raw blasted granite, uncompacted, 3 days old. The machine is heavier than the ledge was designed to hold by men, estimating by eye. In one documented incident, a boulder released by a blast on the slope above came down without warning and landed directly on a working bulldozer, crushed it, in the words of a soldier who witnessed it, like a fly. By the time anyone could reach the site, the boulder and the machine were below the level of the road surface. The decision was made not to excavate. The road was built over the top. The bulldozer is still there, under the asphalt, exactly where the mountain left it, and every car that drives the Transfăgărășan passes over it without knowing. In July 1970, a summer storm caught 7 soldiers sheltering together on the upper slopes. Rocks and rainwater came down together. All 7 were killed. One incident in one summer. The work continued. Now, the tunnel. The ventilation during construction was whatever the mountain chose to push through the bore on any given day. In a hole barely 6 meters wide, bored into solid granite at altitude, the air after a blast was smoke, rock dust, and carbon monoxide. Workers returned when the crew leader decided it was safe enough. Safe enough was not the same as safe. It was a judgment made by a man who also needed the work to keep moving. There is an account, not in official records, but preserved in the memory of people who were there, that during the most dangerous phases of tunnel blasting, when the explosive assembly teams worked at the tunnel entrance above the abyss, the workers held hands. A human chain of 20 to 30 men lined along the edge so that no pressure wave or sudden gust could take one of them over without the others holding on. Not a harness, not a rope anchor, hands, because that was what was available. Now the question that had been building for months inside the mountain, when the two bores came close enough that the crews could hear each other's blasting through the rock. Muffled detonations coming through 20, then 10, then 5 meters of granite. No one knew yet if they had aligned. They had been drilling toward a mathematical point that neither team could see, through rock that deflected their lines in small ways with every shot, trusting calculations made on the surface to hold true underground. For comparison, the Simplon Tunnel in Switzerland, completed in 1905, over 19 kilometers through the Alps by teams with the most sophisticated surveying instruments available, achieved a breakthrough alignment error of less than 1 centimeter. Still considered one of the great precision feats in tunnel engineering history. The Capra-Balia tunnel was 887 meters, bored by military crews who were not professional tunnel engineers, in a mountain that had been resisting the road since the first blast. When the two faces broke through to each other in 1972, they met. The tunnel was continuous. Someone had calculated it correctly. Their name is on no plaque at the tunnel entrance. The credit, at the opening ceremony, went to the man who had ordered it built. Ceaușescu visited the road during construction in 1971. He arrived with Elena, with the apparatus of state, with the photographers and the officials and the banners that followed him everywhere by this point in his rule. He looked at what was being built. He made a decision. The road had been designed as a military route, a gravel surface serviceable for armored vehicles, functional, not scenic. Standing in the Transfăgărășan Mountains, looking at what his workers had cut through granite, Ceaușescu decided it should be upgraded. Two-lane paved road, tourism potential. A road that would open the mountains to ordinary Romanians, that would show the world what Romania could build. This was, according to the journalist Lavinia Betia, who spoke to a Romanian documentary crew in 2015, entirely typical. During visits to work sites or in front of models made by designers for future projects, he imposed major changes, and it was left to the specialists to find a way to realize what he had suggested. The specialists found a way. The workers found a way. The deadline did not change. Understand who Nicolae Ceaușescu was by 1971. He had come to power in 1965 as a reformist by Eastern Bloc standards, genuinely more independent of Moscow than any other Warsaw Pact leader. His 1968 speech had made him briefly a kind of hero in the West, the communist who stood up to the Soviets, and Nixon had visited Bucharest and Ceaușescu had visited Washington. And for a few years Romania had occupied a strange diplomatic space, too independent for Moscow, too communist for the West, interesting to both. But the internal evolution was something else. By the early 1970s, the personality cult was beginning. The portraits, the sycophantic newspapers, the construction projects that announced power rather than served purpose. The Transfăgărășan was not yet Ceaușescu's folly in the way the Palace of Parliament would later be. That edifice, the heaviest building in the world, would be built in central Bucharest by demolishing a quarter of the medieval city, would displace 40,000 residents, would consume resources the country did not have through the 1980s, while Romanians queued for bread in the cold. The Transfăgărășan was built before that phase, when the megalomania was strategic rather than purely symbolic. There was a military logic to it, flawed but real. The other mountain passes were valley routes, vulnerable to blocking. A high ridge crossing, even a seasonal one, gave the Romanian army a genuine option it had not had before. The problem, which military planners almost certainly understood, and no one was in a position to tell Ceaușescu, was that a road accessible only 5 months a year across the highest terrain in the country was not the strategic asset that justified its cost in any serious military analysis. It closes in October, it opens in June. Any Soviet invasion that arrived between November and May, which is to say, any Soviet invasion that arrived during the months when an army would actually want to move, would find the Transfăgărășan buried under 4 meters of snow and irrelevant. The road was built for an invasion that arrived in the right season. The invasion never came. The road stayed closed 7 months a year. Ceaușescu opened it on September 20th, 1974. He stood beside Elena under a banner that read, "Long live the Communist Party, the leading political force in our society." He had the photographs taken. He declared the road open. The specialists and the soldiers who had built it were not in the photographs. The death count. The official number is 40. Military records kept by the same government that ordered the project set the impossible deadline, and had every institutional reason to keep the figure small. Soldiers who died in construction accidents in the Făgăraș in 1970, 1971, 1972, 1973 were still in uniform. Their deaths could be recorded in ways that never surfaced in any headline count. No one outside the Romanian Army's record system, which has never been fully opened, knows the real number. What the people who were there consistently said in the decades after is that the official figure was not the real figure. Some who were present estimated hundreds. What is not disputed is who they were. Not experienced construction workers who had chosen dangerous work. Conscripts, boys of 18 and 19 assigned to mountain duty as part of mandatory military service, handed explosives they had not been trained to use, given no safety equipment suited to the conditions, offered no option to refuse. They were told the project was a matter of national defense. The country needed the road. The timeline was what it was. A rockfall that kills 7 men in a single event gets recorded. The individual soldier who falls from a scaffold at 1,900 meters on a Tuesday in March, and whose body cannot be recovered until the weather clears the next morning. His death is recorded somewhere, but whether it appears in the final count of 40 depends on decisions made by people under pressure to keep the number small. Most of those boys expected to do their service and come home. The ones who did not come home are not in the photographs from September 20, 1974, when Ceaușescu stood beneath a banner reading "Long Live the Communist Party," the leading political force in our society, and declared the road open. The road was open. The bulldozer was already under it. The road that was never used for its intended purpose became something else entirely. In the decades after Ceaușescu's death, he and Elena were arrested during the Revolution of December 1989, tried in a military tribunal on Christmas Day, and shot in a courtyard before the proceedings were properly concluded, in a manner that suggested the new government was frightened of what he might say if he had more time to talk. Romania opened the Transfăgărășan to the public and watched what happened. Romanians drove it for the views, for the waterfalls that hung directly over the road on the southern ascent, for the glacial clarity of Balea Lake at the summit, and the feeling of being above the clouds in a country where most people had never been above 500 meters, for the sheer physical fact of a road that should not exist, existing. Then in 2009, the Top Gear crew came. 3 supercars, Jeremy Clarkson, declaring into a camera that this was the best road in the world. 6.7 million British viewers watching. The footage showed what the road actually looked like at speed, which was unlike anything that had been broadcast to a mass audience before. The tourists arrived, from across Europe, from the UK especially, driving their own cars up the same switchbacks that had been cut by soldiers who had not been asked. The road that no armored division had ever used became one of the most visited mountain roads on the continent. There is a specific irony in this that does not require embellishment. A road built in fear, built for war, built on the bodies of young men who were given explosives they did not know how to use, and told to get through the mountain by a deadline that could not slip. That road is now described in travel publications as a romantic drive, as a bucket list experience, as the best road in the world. The travel writers are not wrong. The road is extraordinary. The switchbacks on the northern descent, the views from the summit, the tunnel emerging into the sudden light above Balea Lake. These are genuinely remarkable. The mountain that fought the construction so hard is beautiful, in the way that things that can kill you are often beautiful. But the asphalt that tens of thousands of tourists drive over every summer is the same asphalt that was poured over a flattened bulldozer with a man inside it, because the rock that had crushed it was too heavy to move, and the schedule did not allow for delay. This is not a metaphor. It is reported fact. The machine is there, under the road. Drive the Transfăgărășan today. You have approximately 5 months to do it, June through October, before the mountain closes it for the season. The surface is good for most of its length, rough in the spots that have been repaired more times than properly, which is not the same thing. The tunnel is unlit for most of its 887 meters, and you cross it in your headlights in about 45 seconds and emerge into the northern side with the sudden feeling of the valley opening below you. At the summit, in summer, there will be food stands selling sausages and cheese and something warm. There will be tourists. There will be the sounds of car engines cooling after the climb. The granite walls that line the road are the walls of the Transfăgărășan Mountains, which are indifferent to all of this. They were here before the road and will be here after. The rockfalls that closed sections for weeks during construction still happen. The road still closes periodically for clearing. The mountain continues to make its positions known. The road is still there. It opens, usually, in mid-June, when the mountain snow has retreated enough to clear the pass. It closes in late October or early November, when the first serious snowfall of winter settles over the Balea summit and refuses to leave. In the 5 months it is open, it is one of the most extraordinary roads in Europe. The southern ascent through beech and fir forests, the cliffs rising on both sides as the valley narrows, the Goat Waterfall, Cascada Capra, that falls directly across the road in a haze of mist. The moment when the trees end and the granite begins, and you are above the tree line with nothing between you and the sky but the road you are driving. The tunnel is still unlit. You enter it in daylight, and you lose the daylight after the first bend, and you are in your headlights in a tube of granite for 887 meters. The ventilation is natural, which means it is whatever the mountain decides to push through the bore on a given day. In summer, it is cold in there. You come out the other side onto the northern descent, and the valley of Transylvania opens below you in a way that, if you have never seen it before, makes you stop the car. There are still rockfalls. The road closes periodically. The mountain is still working on it. There is a detail about the Transfăgărășan that almost no account mentions, because it requires context to be remarkable. The road was built to enable an armored division of approximately 2,000 vehicles to move from southern Romania into Transylvania within 24 hours of a Soviet attack. This was the specific military calculation that justified the project's cost, in money and in lives. An armored division crossing the Făgăraș Mountains in force within a day to defend the north. The road is 40 kilometers per hour on average. It is 2 lanes. It is closed from October to June. An armored column moving at tactical speed be considerably slower than a tourist in a rented car. The hairpin turns on the northern descent are tight enough to require buses to execute multi-point turns. No armored division ever used it, not because Romania was not invaded. It was not, but because even if it had been, the road was not what had been described to Ceaușescu in those paranoid weeks after the Prague speech. The military planners who received the order built what they were told to build. Whether any of them told Ceaușescu what they had built versus what he thought he had ordered is not in the record. What he built, in the end, was a road that 5 million tourists now drive every year. A road that sits in European travel rankings alongside the Stelvio and the Grossglockner and the Nürburgring. A road that is beautiful, technically demanding, open to anyone with a car and the right season. A road built by boys who were handed dynamite they did not know how to use, on a mountain that did not want a road. Their names are not on the opening banner. The banner said, "Long live the Communist Party, the leading political force in our society." The road, at least, is still there. And somewhere beneath the asphalt, in a section of the southern ascent that was filled in and graded and paved over without excavation. A bulldozer that was crushed like a fly by a falling rock in the early 1970s sits exactly where the mountain left it. Drive over it if you want to. People do every summer in their tourist cars on their way to the best road in the world. They do not know it is there,